go back just for a second because apparently I wasn't recording. Put those on there. There and there. So they had a lot of water in England, a lot of rivers, a lot of streams, a lot of canals, a lot of ways to transport things and to gain power. Do we use water today in our world to power things? Yeah, right, TVA. We use water in our system right here at home in Alabama, very much so. We have TVA dams all across the river, and they help power our homes and our schools and things of that sort. So what was this thing called the Industrial Revolution? We talked about it earlier. It was a revolution that dramatically changed, or a revolution, something that dramatically changes the way something works. I don't think this next one's on your sheet, so don't worry about it. I don't think it's on there. So, but the governments, like Wiley said, changed during the American and French revolutions. So this is going to be a dramatic change in industry. And the dramatic change is that people started making goods by machine instead of by hand. Before this time, blacksmiths would have made swords and armor and things of that sort. That had always been going on. But they made them by hand. Now they're going to make them by machines. The other way that it's going to change is that people are going to leave their homes and stop working on farms and in the villages and move to cities and seek employment in the factories. And the entire economy is going to change. It's going to go from a production of things made in the home, so not mass production, but very specific production, to mass production, meaning many things made very, very quickly. And it's going to become a consumer-driven economy, meaning that the things that are made are the things that people wanted. You didn't just make things because that's all you knew how to do anymore. You made things because you knew people would buy it. So it changes how the economy works. It changes how people live, but it also changes how things are made. So there's a lot of changes going on during the Industrial Revolution. So now we know what it is and what's going to change. We know why it began in England for the most part, and we know that it began in England. But how did the factors needed for industrialization develop? How did they gain a large population? Well, here's how. This guy named Jethro Tull invented something that helped create a new method of farming. See, because a large supply of population, or a large population, has to have what to survive? What do you need as a basic human? Food and water. Well, water is guaranteed, right? We know where that is. We just have to get to it. Food goes up and down based off the farming techniques. Well, Jethro Tull invented something called the seed drill. Anybody farm? Garden? Does anybody do that here? I don't do it, so. Is farming fun? It's hard work, right? Okay. So you dig holes, and you put seeds in it. You dig holes, and you put seeds in it. You dig holes, you put seeds in it. This thing did it for you. This seed drill was pulled by a horse, and back behind it had those prongs. And those two prongs punctured the ground. And when it punctured the ground, it would also deposit seeds in the ground. And when it does that, it makes a better germination effect. It increases that effect, and it boosts crop yields. So this seed drill helps create a more stable food supply, which we'll see in just a second. So by placing the seeds below the surface level, this germination has a greatly increased effect and produces more food. When you have more food, you can supply more people with food. When you have better people, or I guess better food supply, people live a little bit longer and they grow a little bit more. and it produces a healthy environment for more people to be brought into the world. So the food surplus created by the seed drill allowed England to feed a large population, which supported the population to work in factories. Because there was a large population, it would lead to a large supply of low-skilled workers. If you're low-skilled, it means what? Yeah, you're not very good at whatever you do. So you don't have skills. Y'all would technically be low-skilled workers. Not because you've done anything wrong, because you just haven't been taught how to do anything. Does anybody have a job? Okay. So you've got some skills, but most of us have no skills. I've only had 2 jobs in my life, so I don't have many skills. But, I have the skills to apparently teach this. I got a degree in it. Apparently you will go to school or you will go get a job and they'll train you. That's when you become a high-skilled worker. And if you're really highly skilled, guess what you get more of? Money. And so a low-skilled laborer is somebody that doesn't have a lot of skills. But these factories needed this because they didn't really need you to know very much. You just had to stand there and control a machine. And so this increased and stable food supply allowed this huge low-skilled population to develop. So kind of everything, again, happens in a certain order. These people develop into a low-skilled labor force. And so because you have so many people, you eventually have enough people to run these factories. A couple more ingredients to have this industrial revolution begin in England is the resources. Well, 2 of the main ones were coal and iron. That's a coal mine. I don't think that I would ever want to work in a coal mine, but it might happen. I never know. But these coal mines are, very damp and dirty, and you can kind of see that there. And coal was used to power factories, heat homes, and could operate a device called the steam engine. We'll talk about it a little bit later. But coal was the main ingredient of the Industrial Revolution because it allowed them to have more power. Water was definitely a source of power, but coal would eventually become the leading source of power. And we still use coal today. There's a big debate over it, right, with President Biden, fracking and all the different things that involves coal. Whether or not you're on one side or the other, it doesn't matter. What I'm trying to say is that this is still a main ingredient of industrialization right now. Iron is also important because it was used to build factories, machines, and buildings due to its strength. Iron was stronger than wood. It's crazy to think that up until the 1700s, things were made of wood still. But that was the way it was. And so that changes during the Industrial Revolution, but mainly because we developed processes to use this stuff in. Most manufactured goods have iron or are made of iron, and they were produced in a factory run on coal. And so it's like, how are these connected? Most manufactured goods are made with iron and produced in a factory running on coal. So based off all that information, we know why the Industrial Revolution began in England. We know where it began, obviously in England. And we know kind of where we're heading with all these changes. We know about some of the changes that are going to come about. But what industry, based off this picture, do you think was the first to industrialize? What do you think is going on in the picture? Sewing. And sewing is not really the term that we're going to talk about. We're going to call it the textile industry or textile production, meaning they make what? Clothes. Yeah. And clothes are important. Not many people I know don't wear clothes. And if they do, I don't really hang around them very much. You know what I mean? So, most people wear clothes. Most of y'all have multiple outfits in your closet. And so the textile industry is the first to industrialize. The first factories only produce textiles or goods that are made from cotton. and this was the first industry to industrialize in both Europe and the United States. And we'll see the spread of the industrialization as we get to talking about it a little bit more. Now we're going to kind of change gears. We know what's the first one to industrialize. These inventions are what further the Industrial Revolution in the beginning. Okay, so based off this first one, the spinning jenny, what do you think is going to happen with this sucker? They're going to spin the wheel and they're going to rotate, and it's going to do what? We don't know, right? We have no idea. It's going to spin thread or spin or weave wool into yarn at a much faster rate. This was created in 1764 by James Hargreaves. And this was literally an invention made to do things faster. It would do it about 8 times faster than one worker. So one worker could spin thread on their own or help weave wool into yarn faster. So that one person could weave wool, but this thing could do 8 at a time. And it is powered by a person. So it's man-powered. So when does it stop working? When the person stops working. So it's also made of wood, and so you have some differences there. We were going to do an activity. We still can if I have the stuff, but maybe just one of you if we have some time. But I was going to show you how much horsepower you create as a person. Based off the formula, most of you will probably create maybe half of a horsepower. So we're not very powerful. We're just not. So with old and new inventions, what is our pattern with them? Is there only one iPad? No, right? Like we didn't go iPad first generation then stop, right? There's like multiple iPads. Is there only one iPhone? No, there's multiple iPhones. What do we do with technology with new inventions once they are created? What do we try to do with them? Make them better. So here we go. The water frame is the next step in this process. And what do you think was the one flaw of the spinning jenny that you saw right there? It was man-powered. So based off the name of the water frame, what do you think? It's powered by water. So this water frame created by Richard Arkwright in 1767, a couple years later, improves upon the spinning jenny by using fast-moving streams to spin the wheels. So instead of you spinning it over and over and over again, now the water does it. Where does this thing have to be located, though? By a stream. Do y'all have streams by your house? I mean, I have one close by, but it's not right by my house, right? Some of you might have one in your backyard, but most of you don't. Also, this thing right here, big. Like, take up about half the room. So not something you can just have in your house all the time, right? So this is where the change starts happening. They have to start moving these things to factories or places by the river, by the water, and also in bigger buildings because these things take up so much space. It replaces replaces factories. It replaces the idea of manpower or animal power with water power. Y'all ever seen water stop? Water doesn't stop. Water goes around, keeps moving always. If it's going downhill, it's moving. So water power is much more powerful than animal or manpower. Also moves things inside the factories. But, again, is this perfect? Probably not. So they keep improving it. So now you have the spinning mule. Does anybody know what a mule is? Yeah, it's a hybrid, right? Well, so is this. The spinning mule was created by Samuel Crompton, and it combined all these inventions into one device in 1779. Just like the mule is a hybrid, so is this device between the spinning jenny and the water frame. It took what was best from the spinning jenny, which was all the different lines of thread, and the power source of the water frame. So it used water to move the spokes that created the spinning technique and helped spin the fibers into yarn. It made the thread much stronger than the Jenny because the Jennies kept breaking because it was powered by hand. And it used that power to move back and forth on the track like a water table to generate energy. So that piston moves back and forth over and over and over again, and it creates the energy there. Need this. Just in case. Well, we didn't stop there, and we still haven't stopped till today. We've never stopped trying to create new inventions and improve upon ourselves. So you have the power loom. It was created by Edmund Cartwright in 1787. And what's the main difference between it and all the other machines that we've talked about? What's it made out of? Somebody say metal? Yeah, it's made out of metal. It took iron and instituted that. So it's more durable than the earlier versions. It's made out of metal, so it's more powerful, it's more stable, it's more reliable. Because it's made from iron instead of wood. It should be on the back side now. It also works faster than the earlier versions because it burned coal, to boil water and create steam power. So not only is it faster because you can power it at a much faster rate because you're not relying on the water, but also what can you do with this one that you couldn't do with the water frame and the spinning mule and all those other ones? Where can this one be located? Anywhere, because it runs on coal. It can be placed anywhere. So your factories now don't have to be on the water. They can be placed anywhere. So now you can move your factory to where the resources are. You can cut down on the cost of production, maximize your profits. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And so what do you think you got here besides the stream? Factory. The first factories are built in Cromford, England by Richard Arkwright, the guy that invented the water frame in 1771. These would employ about 300 people or up to 300 people. Some would employ less. Some might even employ more. And they would be used to house these massive machines because these were not household machines anymore. They were very, very large. And so these machines would be used in the factories. Also, it helped because in the past, I would make something, but I couldn't finish it. So I'd have to send it to Carson, and Carson would work on it a little while, and he couldn't finish it. So he'd send it to Nathan, and Nathan might finish it, and then he would send it back to me, and that would take a long time. But in the factory, we could all do the same thing, but we could do it all in one day because all we would be doing is waiting on that next product. So the factory revolutionized how we worked as well. Instead of it taking matters of weeks to make something, now it took a matter of days or maybe even a couple of hours. The first U.S. factory built by Samuel Slater, a former British textile worker, was built in Pawtucket, Rhode Island in 1793. Now remember, the first textile factories built in England was in 1771. That's 22 years later. Why do you think it took so long? Why did it take so long for it to get to the United States? And it wasn't because they had to travel over an ocean. I know that does take a long time, but not 22 years. Yeah. Could, yeah. Resources, manpower, factors of production like that, yeah, could be. The unique part about the Industrial Revolution is that Great Britain had this rule or law that their technology and their ideas could not leave their country. You weren't allowed to spread the Industrial Revolution. Samuel Slater, slowly but surely, actually built up his ideas, built up his knowledge of the industrial systems in England, and eventually left and brought it over illegally. And that's how it happened in most countries. It was smuggled out of England into these other countries like Germany and many other places. So England was trying to hoard it all for themselves because they were the only industrialized nation at this point. The U.S. would quickly follow behind them, and then other nations would as well. Germany would become a pretty good one as well for a little while. As new inventions made the textile production faster and more reliable, other factories were built based on better technology. You know, whether it was how to set them up for better production, assembly lines and whatnot, or just how to maximize power. Early factories had to be placed on a water source for easy access to power and transportation. We'll talk about it tomorrow with transportation, but you had to be able to transport your goods to market. Waterways are a great source for that. Another example of a factory sitting on a waterway used for travel, probably not in this picture used for power, because what do you see coming out of the top of those smokestacks? Yeah, steam or smoke. So they're clearly using some steam power there, but probably beginnings of that factory, they didn't have that. Another canalway to help divert the water to where they could use it. All factories are taking cotton in the textile industry from the southern United States and spinning them into yarn. This gets into the idea of, are there detrimental effects of the Industrial Revolution? So if all this cotton is coming from the southern United States, think about the gigantic cotton fields that we have now. Now, they don't have the means of production that we have to farm that cotton and produce the stuff that they need to. What do they have to gather the cotton and get it ready for market? Well, what might they have to have more of? And it wouldn't be a good thing. Slaves. So the Industrial Revolution sounds like a really good thing. Like, yeah, we're getting better at our jobs, right? It also had some negative aspects to it. So try to remember that as we keep going forward. Eli Whitney is another great inventor during this time. He greatly speeds up the process in which cotton could be prepped for the process of spinning it into yarn by creating the cotton gin. We have a big cotton gin out in Oakland. It's snowing. Just to let y'all know. It's not going to stick, but it is snowing. It's pretty sleeting, I guess. But the cotton gin pulls seeds from the cotton, which did it much quicker or much more quickly than it could be done by hand. Have any of y'all ever pulled seeds from cotton? Y'all probably all, did y'all go somewhere and do that? Something like, or did you just go to a cotton field and you were like, I don't know. Some of the students I've taught have been on a field trip and been to a cotton gin, and then they showed them the process. And then some of you are just weird and crazy and went to cotton fields and picked seeds out. That'd be Alyssa. I'm just kidding, Alyssa. But no, I mean, I've done that. I've been out in a cotton field. My parents had them near their houses, and I picked it out. It's not an easy process. And I imagine doing that with a big old barrel of it, and that's your job all day. It's going to take a while. So we tried to figure out how to do this more quickly, and in doing so, we became a lot better and more efficient at it, and it allowed for more production. Then Eli Whitney also created something called interchangeable parts. This is why you can fix your phone and your computer and your car and everything else without having to take it to an expert. You can fix a TV if you want to now, because what we figured out is that it's better to fix or have parts in there that are replaceable than have to replace the whole thing. If your TV breaks, yeah, you could go buy a new one, but you could also fix it for pretty cheap if you know what you're doing. All the parts are available. You can see this is a revolver. And this gun, if the trigger breaks, you can replace it. Yes, sir. Guess you got distracted with your. He was trying not to stab himself with his pencil. He wasn't going very fast. It was not very impressive. I'm only doing this for the YouTube likes. It's no big deal. So this revolver, if you broke a piece of it, you could replace it. And most guns are made this way now. Creates molds of products that were highly breakable. Not that they were breakable on purpose, that they just tended to break. And so he did this so that he could create a way to fix these things more easily. This started out with rifles and revolvers, but then led to factory. Whoa, really snow now. They might let us out at 3. It was a joke. But, now we have factory parts. Again, TVs can be fixed, computers, cameras, it doesn't matter. Everything's pretty much replaceable now. And that's because of interchangeable parts. What is this right here? Golly, as bad as Carson. What do y'all think that picture was? If you had to guess. It looks like a locomotive, right? It's pretty close. It is somewhat of a locomotive. Good? All right. Yeah, it is a steam engine. And it's a really pretty much close to a locomotive as you could get. This one is. This is not the original steam engines. Most steam engines would take up pretty much this whole room. It was a form of machinery that used steam power from coal to power everything on a more consistent basis. Coal was burned to heat water. Water created steam pressure. That steam pressure would push pistons up and down, and that piston moving up and down over and over and over again created the power to spin the machinery. And you can kind of see that here. Not to get in the way. But this is where the coal would go. Coal would get hot. Pressure would go up into that mechanism at the top. It would push the piston in and out because of the pressure, which would spin the wheel, and the wheel would spin the wheels on the bottom. And so you get the motion of this engine. But in a factory, it was not that way. It would be these gigantic tubes, and this piston would go up and down and up and down and up and down over and over again. But it would spin a wheel just like that, but it would run the factory machinery. So it was like flipping the light switch on. Power's coming from somewhere. It was just in a gigantic room, so you wouldn't see that part of it. James Watt took the early workings of the steam engine and perfected it in 1781. He's the one that's credited with the steam engine. Other people had kind of already worked on it. He perfected it. But the steam engine is probably the most revolutionary invention of the Industrial Revolution because it allowed for the means of transportation to change. We'll talk about it tomorrow. But also it allowed factories to be built anywhere. And you could power many more machines thanks to the steam engine because it could be more powerful than just one spinning water wheel. And it was not dependent on location. You just needed coal, and power would come from heating it up. Okay? Any questions there? Okay. Your exit ticket's online. It's on Schoology. It's very simple. The only way that you can get this wrong is if you don't do it. The question for the day is not really even a question. Did you say me? Oh. The question or the assignment, the task, thank you. The task is for you to predict. In predicting means that you could be wrong, and it's okay. I know you want to predict correctly, but do not look this up. What I want you to do is predict 3 positive outcomes of the Industrial Revolution and 3 negative outcomes of the Industrial Revolution. Basically, how did society predict? How did society change in a positive way or in a negative way? You have to come up with at least 3 for each side. They don't have to be incomplete sentences. They don't have to be in any form. Just 3 ideas that are either positive or negative outcomes of the Industrial Revolution. The only way you can do this wrong is if you put I don't know or something like koala bear. Okay, I know Sarah's over there laughing, but somebody will try to put I don't know, and they might try to put koala bear. So if you're at home listening to this video, make sure you do that. We'll learn about the transportation changes and effects of the Industrial Revolution tomorrow. And if you have any questions, send me an email. Have a great day. Not y'all.